Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously, without instruction.
See what the Empire has done to your lives, your families, and your freedom?
Good people will fight if we lead them.
The rebellion is spreading.
Now we take the war to them.
The Republic will be reorganized.
Systems either change or die.
Into the first.
You give way to an enemy this evil with this much power, and you condemn the galaxy to an eternity of submission.
And wake up. There is one way. Be fighting from the start.
Long live the Empire!
Fight the Empire!
Let's call it war.
Remember this. Try.
Hey, Sophie.
Hey, Eleanor.
Where does Kylo Ren keep his PS5?
Starkiller base? I don't know.
In his Kylo den. Welcome to Daughters of Ferrix, a podcast about politics and history, sometimes in Star Wars, sometimes not in Star Wars,
Mostly in Star Wars.
etc.
This episode featuring Ellie's cat.
Yeah, my cat is here because we are recording in my closet, the closet of my bedroom. Daughters of Ferrix closeted now and forever.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be.
As it happens, our normal recording location is closed for the holiday season. Happy holidays, everybody. It's making my life hard. So, this episode and the next will be recorded here. Welcome to my home, y'all. It's gonna get real stuffy in this closet.
It's gonna get extremely
gonna be
stuffy
real
in
bad.
this closet. It's gonna be very bad.
If you want to know what it looks like, if you want to know what contraption I've got rigged up, go follow us on Twitter, @FerrixPod, please. All right.
Imagine a gavel noise.
Imagine a
right?
gavel noise. Here. I call this trial to order. All rise. Course now in session. The Honorable Judge Sophie is presiding.
Judge, jury, and executioner, it should be noted.
Executioner. Today's case is that of Saw Gerrera, Onderanian galactic freedom fighter and extremist.
Prosecutor, please state your case.
Okay, we did the trial bit long enough to justify. Yeah, I can use the clickbait title. Yeah, okay. As I said, we're going to talk about Saw Gerrera. Saw is in this really unique position in Star Wars because he kind of pops up everywhere, but he's never gotten a story about him. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
Some might say, like, Trotsky to to Lenin, Stalin, or whatever.
I thought Nemec was Trotsky. We're mixing our metaphors. Yeah, so Saw first shows up in the Clone Wars, but since then he has appeared across essentially all major storytelling mediums because he's just so damn adaptable. He can always function as an ally or as a foil to main characters, and all of those appearances come together to create this tapestry of a character greater than the sum of his individual appearances. Saw crops up in the discourse a lot, at least in left-leaning Star Wars circles, because people have complicated feelings about him. I mean, what do we do as anti-fascists with a character who rightfully opposes the Empire, but in-universe characters insist is an extremist? Do we listen to the claim, or do we chalk it up to the pearl-clutching of fence-sitting writers? I would say it's more than either of those options. It's a complicated question, so our answer must be complex as well.
The woke left is canceling Saw Gerrera.
Trying to cancel Saw Gerrera for the simple crime. We'll get there.
I think this would be more like the woke center, though, wouldn't it? Because
the woke left is canceling the Rebel Alliance for not being
radical
radical
cool
enough.
Yeah.
I have my own feelings about Saw Gerrera that I'm going to share throughout this episode, but I'm not here to say if Saw Gerrera is definitively evil or righteous or whatever. I don't care so much if he should be tried at The Hague. I just want to understand the guy, his deeds, his story, what makes him tick. Think of what we're doing as an episode of Behind the Bastards, but for a Star Wars character. This is Saw Gerrera. So, our story begins, imagine a story beginning, on the Inner Rim planet Onderon, ruled by a monarchy with senatorial representation in the Republic. But when the Clone Wars looms near, the then King Ramses Dendup saw the corruption inherent in the Confederacy and the Republic both, and declined to take a side in the war, which works perfectly. Everyone lives happily ever after.
I feel like this is a lie.
The Separatists incite a coup.
You know, every time I want to root for the Separatists, right, which is pretty frequently because, I don't know, I think they're cool. Then they go and do some shit like this where they're like, yeah, let's overthrow a government for no reason.
Star Wars likes having a bad guy. The Separatists start a coup. They institute a new king, Sanjay Rash, who is supported militarily by the CIS droid army, and Dendup is deposed and imprisoned. Rash acted primarily as a figurehead to govern according to the will of Count Dooku. Count Dooku shit.
Our boy.
It seems like this rule was somewhat unpopular. When the Separatists first invaded, some Onderanians fled to the jungle to hide, while others openly defied King Rash and were exiled from Onderon's capital city.
How do you have a planet where, like, a significant portion of your population is just like, yes, new king, let's flee to the jungle?
It's not all of the people, it's just a couple of them.
Oh, okay. I was thinking, like, half of people were just
let's go
to the jungle.
It is not the majority. It's like a couple dozen at best. Anyway. Some people leave, some people are exiled from ISIS, which is ISIS, not ISIS. They say it ISIS in the Clone Wars. Every episode starts with Tom Kane being like, Calamity in ISIS, and you're like, man, I need you to really stress that you're not saying the letter S.
Calamity in ISIS. Have you seen their new logo?
No, is it different?
It's like a postmodernist corporate simplification
r/vexillology, but for ISIS?
Correct.
Anyway, ISIS, not ISIS. It stands for
the Islamic Caliphate of
Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. In time, these people organize themselves into a resistance to fight battle droid deployments in and outside of the city. That includes Lux Bonteri, who is the disenfranchised son of Onderon's former senator, who was murdered by Dooku in a false flag attack. Her name was Mina Bonteri. We talked about her in episode 5.
So she got 9/11.
She got 9/11 at the same time as the Senate building.
Flag attack.
Oh, Sophie does not believe that 9/11 was a false flag attack.
That is correct. I do not believe that 9/11 was a false flag attack. It's just, I'm going home for the holidays in a couple days, and that is somehow, after 20 years, still one of my dad's favorite topics of discussion.
I'm not even going to try to unpack that. Lux attempts to join some Mandalorian terrorists in their vendetta against Dooku. They wanted to assassinate him, but that doesn't go super well. So he ends up back on his homeworld to fight the Separatists there. The Onderon rebels also include sniper Saw Gerrera and her older brother Saw, both thrown out of Onderon's capital city for their open rebellion. It's not clear their precise ages, but Saw and Stila are solidly adults.
Parents, name your kid Saw.
Saw Gerrera considered himself the unofficial leader of the Onderon rebels. He saw himself as a staunch patriot. He saw Dendup as the rightful king and valued an idealized liberty for his planet. Saw was a charismatic dude, but he could also be arrogant, quick to anger, and dismissive of some of his fellow resistance fighters, especially if he didn't think that they had what it took. In 20 BBY, about 2 years into the Clone War, the insurgency was struggling. Despite their constant efforts, they weren't gaining any ground from the Separatists. So in a Hail Mary approach to finally end the occupation, the fighters contact the Jedi Council.
Always a good move.
Yeah, I don't know how they got that number, but
it's like 809.
Yeah, it's on the fucking
Jedi
web.
Today.
Customer support. It's just a Jocasta New manning the phones from like 9 to 9, and you can't reach them after dark. The rebels asked the council directly for military provisions and gear, which the council is hesitant to give. Officially, Onderon's king seceded to the Confederacy. Direct Republic interference would be an act of overreach. Meddling in an internal Onderonian conflict and funding insurgencies could put innocents at risk. The Jedi Council decides that situations such as these are an opportunity to attack soft targets.
I don't like that phrasing.
They're going to attack soft targets while Republic forces wage the larger war. A war on two fronts via a local proxy.
Something that has never happened before in history of any countries that you might be thinking of.
In any country named the United States of America.
Or the Soviet Union, or, I don't know, the United Kingdom, China. You know, just start rattling off the list of, like, countries that have ever been important, and...
Don't worry, guys, it's fine. Yoda says that fear can't be a means to an end, so we, as the Jedi Council, agree to try really hard not to fund terrorism. The council sends...
They have weapons of mass destruction on whatever planet
they have weapons of mass destruction on Onderon. We have to support
the Northern Rebels.
Okay, so the Jedi Council sends 3 Jedi, including Council member Obi-Wan Kenobi, we're familiar, and a clone captain to Onderon. Sends them with various resources and droid-oriented munitions and some other stuff.
And some other stuff?
It's not clear.
Okay.
There are some bombs used, but I'm not clear where they got them from.
So the Jedi Council gave weapons to terrorists. Okay, cool.
This move on Onderon is the prototype for this sort of activity, so I think we can assume that this is a technique used again by the Jedi Council, but we don't know.
This podcast episode is dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Onderon.
Anyway, the Jedi are there to instruct the Onderon rebels in Republic-style ground warfare, how to deal with CIS infantry like AAT tanks and destroyer droids. The insurgents are clear about not fighting the Separatists for the Republic, but they happily accept the training and supplies. The droid army finds the insurgency at their base in a ruined jungle temple and attacks, but with the rebels' new skills and supplies, they easily defeat the droid forces with few losses. Heartened by their success and the Republic's support, the rebels relocate. They sneak into ISIS, not ISIS, still with Jedi in tow, to escalate the conflict, which they do by taking out droid patrols and separatist checkpoints, still favoring ion grenades and other anti-droid tactics to avoid harm done to civilians. In ISIS, the Jedi don't directly take part in the violence, they just stay nearby and watch.
They're military advisors.
But in time, 2 of them and the clone captain return to Coruscant to report, leaving only Jedi Padawan Ahsoka Tano behind to monitor progress as the Republic continues to provide supplies and funding.
Leaving Ahsoka alone.
She's a commander. She's a commander in the Republic Army.
She's 15.
She's 16 at this point.
Oh, good. Someone who should be in charge of the troops. A 16-year-old.
I'm not saying she should, but I am saying she's decently good at it. I'm not in favor of child soldiers, but tactically speaking...
No. Hold on a minute. We just uttered the phrase...
Moving on. Next thing. The people of the city are frightened by the prospect of open warfare. Reasonable. The rebels discuss a concern for the loss of the will of the people. Saw suggests they need to be doing more damage to the separatists, that the progress that they've made is inadequate, to which Steela replies that the rebels need to earn the civilians' trust. So, as a show of strength to their people, the rebels decide to hit a larger target, a major power generator, the source of energy for many substations across the city. Saw and Steela hijack a droid tank, blow a hole in the generator which detonates and bursts into flames that consume the station. This naturally disables the entire power grid and the separatists' ability to easily charge their battle droids. Notably, it's in this conflict that Ahsoka goes from observing to participating, taking down battle droids herself, despite the lack of official Republic presence on Onderon. Anyway, after the generator is disabled, many civilians are emboldened and cheer on the rebels against the droids, as well as taking up arms themselves. It's not really acknowledged in the episode that a lot of their power has just gone out, but whatever, I guess. The point is that it was a success, right? And the separatists aim to retaliate, with Dooku relocating a tactics droid to serve as general of the droid army on Onderon. Meanwhile, at the Republic base in ISIS, the Onderonians continue to discuss the necessity of the public will for the success of their insurgency, and they officially nominate and name a leader of their rebellion. Not Saw, but Steela, which angers Saw, who, as we mentioned, considered himself the leader.
He was in charge,
yeah. The Onderon rebels continue their campaign, with Steela becoming a figurehead in propaganda holograms planted by insurgents, where she names King Rash as a traitor.
Spicy.
King Rash, notably, does not like being called a traitor.
What a surprising reaction.
As infighting begins between the separatist droid general and the general of the Royal Onderon Militia, remember him, he'll be important in a bit, King Rash becomes convinced that the insurgency is a conspiracy, somehow orchestrated by the incarcerated Dendup, so he decides to publicly execute Dendup, to make an example of him. Saw suggests that they break Dendup out the night they receive this news, but Steela, as leader, decides that they ought to wait to save him until they can do it publicly for all of the city to see. Saw ignores her wishes and insists on going to save Dendup himself. Steela airs her frustrations with her brother to Lux Monteri, saying that Saw is brash and doesn't think. Saw breaks into the palace where Dendup is being held and reaches the former king. Dendup is heartened when he learns of the Republic's support for the insurgency, but when Saw attempts to get them both out, he's caught and taken by the droids. Saw is held in a containment field and electrocuted as torture to get the location out of the Onderon rebel base. It's real Star Wars shit. He smokes and everything. It's fucking brutal. But yeah, Saw holds his tongue. In a later interrogation with the Royal General Tandin, we mentioned him, Saw reaffirms his patriotism and his allegiance to Dendup, which Tandin seems to agree with. The next day, the rebels attend the public execution of Dendup and now Saw as well, with Ahsoka a step behind, as advised by the Jedi Council, so as to not advertise Republic intervention. As Dendup is about to be beheaded, Stila shoots the executioner droids, and the rebels lay down a smokescreen. But before they can get Dendup and Saw out, they're stopped by the Separatist droid general. Again, before Dendup is killed, the execution is stopped by General Tandon and the Royal Onderon militia, who pledge themselves to the former king and to the insurgents. Ahsoka openly intervenes for some reason, lightsabers blazing to help them escape, and as they do, the civilians gathered to watch the execution yell in protest and push the droid soldiers back before they can reach the fleeing rebels. So Ahsoka's cover is blown, and they have the king now. The insurgency increases in scale. Propaganda now includes messages from Dendup, who names the Onderon rebels as true sons of Onderon, which is some sexist bullshit, because there are plenty of women in the rebels, very close to half.
So they should be daughters of Onderon.
True.
We're renaming this podcast the Daughters of Onderon in solidarity with our sisters excluded from recognition in the Onderon Rebellion.
I'm not doing that. Fuck Onderon. The will of the public is even more turned against the droids, and open civilian riots and resistance within the city becomes the norm. Stila, now named General of the Resistance by Dendup, demands that the insurgency keep the fight to the outskirts of the city to avoid civilians and infrastructure, to which the Jedi and Dendup agree, but Saw insists that they ought to take the fight straight to the Onderonian seat of power in the heart of the city. Stila expresses that they all want victory, but that it shouldn't be claimed at the cost of innocent lives, to which Saw replies, "This is war." Saw likes that line. Remember it. He's going to rely on it a lot over the course of his life.
There are laws of war and other such things that, like, you're not supposed to murder people.
Come back in 2 weeks when we talk about war crimes.
War crime.
Droid probes discover the new mountain camp of the Onderon rebels, as droid probes do.
Frequently.
And the Separatist general sends soldiers, tanks, and gunships to smoke them out. The rebels fight back long and hard using the native Onderonian fauna as mounts on the ground and in the air. Saw himself fights from astride a bat-like creature called a rooping.
Dude's rock.
Yeah, he fucking chucks, like, grenades and shit at tanks and gunships. Largely, the Resistance does a good job. Their increased numbers do a lot here, but they're getting their asses whooped. And Ahsoka calls the Jedi Council for aid. Ahsoka is told that the Council won't engage Republic forces in an internal affair. So despite Ahsoka having blown her cover, it's still not enough for the Republic to break kayfabe here for some reason. But the Council does actually send aid. A mercenary ship is paid to bring the Onderonian resistance a bunch of RPS-6 rocket launchers. The rebels are on the defensive, having retreated into camp. Saw takes a moment to express his pride in his sister's leadership. Dude's not all bad. But as they're talking, the mercenary ship arrives. The insurgents get kitted out in their new gear. Saw shoots down several droid gunships single-handedly, and they make considerable progress with the Separatist ground forces. Who knew all it takes is handheld guided rocket launchers?
So the Ukraine war, right? That's a current event. When the war started, analysts were all like, oh, the Russians have X number of armored vehicles. They're just going to roll over the Ukrainian army. And as it turns out, wrongo, because the Ukrainians have these lovely things that we've developed in America called, the old term is man-pads. I don't remember what it's an acronym, MANPADS. I don't remember what it stands for, but it's
man-pads for the transmask in your life.
True. It's a rocket launcher, but unlike a traditional RPG, right? You know, like the ones that you would always see like in CNN shots of the guy holding the thing on his shoulder and like shooting an American tank. It's not like that. It's much more advanced, and it launches the rocket into the air, and then you, using this like laser thing, guide it into the tank from above. And so, you know, traditionally tanks don't have very much armor on the top because what the fuck is gonna hit you there?
Rocket, motherfucker.
And as it turns out, rocket. And so the Russian tank force does not exist anymore because the US and various, you know, NATO countries just shipped a shit ton of them to the Ukrainians. So basically the point being that tanks are no longer useful without extensive infantry support. And so the Russians have been putting these things on top of their tanks that I think what you would call war Twitter calls cope cages, because they're designed to make the rocket explode before it hits the top of the tank so the crew has a chance to survive. Largely unsuccessful. So anyway, rockets, as it turned out, are a real force multiplier for infantry forces.
Yeah, okay, so they whoop the Separatists' asses with rockets, but at the same time, droid forces go after Dendup at the camp, and both Stila and Saw go to intervene. Stila manages to save Dendup, but when Saw shoots down a droid gunship headed for their camp, it spirals out of control and collides with the cliff on which Dendup and Stila stand, which leads to Stila's death. Saw is often said to be deeply changed by the loss of his sister. In the Onderon Rebels, she seemed to largely balance out his impulsiveness and general disregard for collateral damage. He references her death many times as a symbol of the cost of armed conflict, and sees it as the moment he was hardened into the warrior that many came to know him as. The insurgency continues to beat back the droid army with tremendous success, and Dooku proclaims Onderon as a lost cause. The Separatist general recalls his troops and executes King Rash in his throne room.
Good. Yeah.
Despite the original aims of the Onderon rebels, when Dendup takes the throne again, he names Onderon as an open ally to the Republic, and Lux Bonteri, remember him, represents the planet in the Republic Senate as his mother once did. And Saw joins the fight for the Republic to protect Onderon. Towards the end of the Clone Wars, Onderon was a target of the Outer Rim sieges, which is a big campaign where Separatist forces launch a counteroffensive against the Republic to gain ground where they were previously losing it. Saw himself fought in the siege of Onderon to defend his world and its Republic alignment. And then the war ends. The CIS loses, and the Republic is reorganized. After the Republic transitions into the Empire in 19 BBY, Saw apparently didn't take well to it. We don't exactly know what happens, but if I had to guess, the Empire moved troopers and other military resources to occupy Onderon almost immediately. And Saw understood it the same way he saw the Separatist invasion, as an unjust and violent military occupation. Saw and members of the earlier Onderonian rebellion formed an insurgency and took to the jungle to harbor and defend citizens turned refugees of the Empire. While on the run, they were tracked by Imperial forces. Clone Force 99, tasked with eliminating their camp of 36. When given their orders, the clones had been told that they were to take out Separatist holdouts, not veritable Republic fighters from the Clone Wars. But faced with the prospect of killing civilians, including children, the clones stood down and left in peace. The Empire later sent another division, but by then the Onderonians had split for their own safety, and Gerrera was elsewhere. Still, the Imperial squad gunned down the entire camp, paramilitary and civilian alike. Empire moment. Even this early, we see a singular vision in Saw's resistance efforts. He understands Palpatine's monarchy as unjust and authoritarian,
It's like monarchy.
Well, yeah. He's been here before. He sees through the excuse of the supposed Jedi coup. Saw names the... He sees through the lies of the Jedi. Yeah. Saw names the efforts against the newly declared Empire as set to become a galaxy-spanning civil war. We also see a connection between his anti-imperial resistance and the loss of his sister. To quote Saw, "If we give up now, everything we fought for, everyone we lost, will have been for nothing." To Gerrera, it's the same fight as the one he fought and lost his sister in. The fight for liberty from oppressive monarchical rule, right?
Which is funny, because technically it is all the same fight against the same ontological evil or whatever of the Sith.
Yeah, I guess. I think Saw sees the rise of the Empire as a betrayal. He fought to enshrine Republic sovereignty over Onderon, and that ultimately led to the domination of his world. His anti-authoritarianism seems to be transitioning into a serious distrust of any governmental bureaucratic system. We'll see more on this later.
He's a libertarian.
Whatever. He's kind of a fascist, but it's not important.
He's a libertarian fascist.
What's the difference? Fucking redundant. The line drawn between Saw's own loss of his world and his sister, and the need to fight the Empire, will shape the ways in which his extremism takes form over the next 2 decades. The resistance effort on Onderon continued, dispatching not just ground troops, but also ISB crackdowns as well. At some point in the next year, Saw Gerrera abandoned the planet, and the remnants of the Onderon rebels took to the wider galaxy to hit the Empire wherever they could. One of Saw's earliest known full-scale insurgent actions was 18 BBY, on the homeworld of then Imperial Moff Tarkin. Saw and 5 or so other operatives infiltrate an Imperial compound. Wearing trooper gear to blend in, they placed explosive charges all around the base in an attempt to assassinate the 5 high-level officers meeting there at the time: Admiral Coburn, General Romedy, Chief Scientist Hemlock of the Advanced Science Division, Commander Krennic, and Moff Tarkin himself. Which, yeah, bad guys. Things probably would have been different if they'd gotten blown up, but it didn't all go smoothly for Saw and friends. Partway through laying the charges throughout the facility, they ran into another unrelated infiltration team, the now rogue Clone Force 99, come to plant a tracker on the Chief Scientist's ship to track him back to the secret Advanced Science Division headquarters, where decommissioned clones were being sent to be imprisoned and used as Imperial test subjects.
Kind of fucked up.
Real bad timing. So, the infiltrating clones explained their mission to Saw and argued that the victory of assassination would be short-lived compared to the vital intel that could be gained by leaving the compound intact. Saw considered the rescue of clone prisoners incidental to taking out top Imperial leadership, a sacrifice for the greater good, as he puts it. This argument between insurgents delayed both parties long enough to be caught by the facility's trooper contingent. Forced to retreat, Saw was unable to place explosives close enough to the command center to harm the officers meeting there. Saw's team stole an Imperial shuttle to escape and detonated the charges, which killed a bunch of troopers and destroyed the clone's tracker, but Tarkin and the others were all untouched. Escaping the facility took a heavy toll on Clone Force 99, and both insurgent teams' missions were total failures. After leaving Onderon, Saw shaped his resistance team, some from Onderon and some from around the galaxy, into a more formalized group, the Partisans, a militia group that would come to be known for their fierce loyalty to the cause and to Saw especially, battle-scarred survivors, chosen for their drive for retribution and paramilitary conflict. The punishment for disloyalty to the Partisans is death. Fun Partisans fact.
Fun Partisans fact. I like the naming scheme. It's a good name.
It's very real.
Contextual.
The Partisans had hardware stashed everywhere. As Saw put it, you have one base, when the Empire hits it, you lose everything. So the Partisan doctrine became to find meeting places that are defensible, uncomfortable, and far away from Imperial eyes. One such meeting place was the Wanton Wellspring, a dive bar on the expansion region planet Ridgetiri. Saw was a regular there and often got involved in spirited conversations about galactic politics. Just like me, for real.
It's like Lenin in Paris. Just like, he occasionally gets involved in spirited conversations about politics.
It's from this bar in 17 BBY that Saw, several Partisans, and some other guys get wrapped up in a multi-week campaign at Salient, an autonomous system at the edge of the corporate sector. Zerpan Industries, an arms manufacturer based there, was a valuable prize for the Empire. The Imperial naval effort was led by Tarkin, opposed by partisan militia action across multiple worlds. The Partisans were defeated and the Empire took the system, but Saw got away, as did an acquaintance of his, smuggler and freedom fighter Has Obit, and it was through Obit that Saw was introduced to the Ursos.
Lore moment.
Galen and Lyra Urso were scientists who met doing crystal research on the planet Espinar, and later had a daughter together whom they named Jin.
We need to cook, Lyra. They were
No,
doing crystal...
no.
They were doing crystal research.
We had a Breaking Bad reference last episode. Anyway, we're familiar. Jin Urso, we know her. Galen especially was considered a leading authority in the galaxy on energy enrichment and crystallography. Yeah? They're not doing crystal math.
The Death Star is, in fact, the universe's largest meth lab.
That doesn't make any sense. Okay.
That's why they had to bring all the crystals.
Why? You don't bring... If it's a meth lab, you make the crystal... Not important. Okay.
Oh, Lord. Okay, go on. Don't say the word crystal again. You can avoid it.
There's so much crystal talk in this entire episode. Okay. On Coruscant, Galen was duped into assisting in the Imperial project Celestial Power, having been convinced that the project was meant to develop a new kind of hyper-efficient energy to be used for the post-war reconstruction effort. But when the project director Krennic, hey, we mentioned him earlier, was unable to present him with examples of the implementation of their research, Galen grew suspicious. Lyra and Galen discovered that Galen's research was essential in the design of a new Imperial superweapon, remember that for later, and they fled. Has Obit had previously assisted in getting the Urso family off of the Separatist world vault during the Clone War, and they contacted him again, Obit putting them in touch with Saw Gerrera to smuggle the three of them off-world. Saw took the Ursos to Lamu, an outer rim planet away from any major hyperroutes, out of the Empire's eyes. The Ursos set up a homestead running a moisture farm, and Saw gives Lyra a comm card for the family to be able to contact him in the event of an emergency. The Partisans spend the next couple of years doing what they do best, making the Empire mad. In 14 BBY, Saw fought them on Kashyyyk, where the Empire ran massive industrial projects using the native Wookiee population as slave labor. Teaming up with Wookiees who evaded captivity, the Partisans strike an Imperial refinery, fending off airdropped Imperial forces and freeing the slaves inside. Before long, however, the Empire pushed back on the insurgency, and though some Partisans disagreed and would stay behind, Saw decided it was time to avoid further losses, and he retreated off-world, abandoning the Wookiees.
Dick move.
Cuts his losses. Saw is a guy who cuts his losses. I will say, he does survive. He survives a lot of stuff. It's probably because he abandons a lot of Wookiees.
Here are Saw Gerrera's 10 tips to avoiding capture by the Empire. Number 1.
Fuck the Wookiees.
Triple Wookiee.
Please do not the Wookiees. The next year, in 13 BBY, time ran out for the Ursos. Krennic showed up on Lamu with an attachment of Death Troopers, which killed Lyra, and took Galen into custody to work on the Imperial superweapon, for which work had slowed. We are familiar. However, before violence broke out, the Ursos called Saw and sent the now 8-year-old Jin to hide in an underground safe room. When Gerrera arrived at Lamu, he found Jin and destroyed the ransacked Urso home to cover their tracks.
It's one of Krennic's better lines, though, is Lyra back from the dead.
Yeah. Just his immediate deadpan, like he didn't believe it for a second. Okay, Jin is a central figure in Saw's life, and so we're going to be devoting a large chunk of this story to her. Saw immediately took Jin under his wing, setting up a makeshift home for the both of them in a separatist outpost turned partisan storehouse on the ocean planet Rhea, chosen for its difficulty of access due to the asteroid belt nearby and lack of surface-dwelling inhabitants. Despite her young age, Saw begins to teach Jin how to defend herself in both hand-to-hand combat and with a blaster, using battle droid bodies and stormtrooper armor strung to a fallen structure as a shooting range.
Very metal.
In Saw's opinion, the Empire doesn't care what age she is, so it's better for her to be able to survive.
I mean, yes, but also no.
Yeah, yes, but also no is kind of the takeaway from...
My name is Warlord in country that has not yet developed economically. And because of me and my buddies, other warlords, there is constantly war in this country. And so, because this village's children are at threat of being destroyed by the war that my buddies and I started, I need to train them to be soldiers to fight in the war.
Saw is not responsible for the Empire doing Empire shit. Jin is a target of the Empire.
Right, but they're
She's
not
an
going
asset
to
to be
kill
used
her.
against Galen. But they're going to capture her. It's the fucking Empire. It's bad to get captured by the Empire.
True.
I'm sorry, Saw's not a good person, but Saw's not responsible for the Empire doing fascism.
You see, by being a woke leftist, Saw has provoked the Empire to be fascist.
Yeah, I was a liberal until I saw these
Saw
Andorian
Gerrera.
rebels with their blue hair and their pronouns,
And I had
it was
no
too
choice.
much.
And I had no choice
I
but
was
to become
forced
a
at
jackbooting
gunpoint.
stormtrooper.
Oh, okay. Jin also took her own interest in a partisan code replicator, a device with which the insurgents forged Imperial clearance codes, transponder signals, and vital scan docs for covert missions. The algorithmic problem-solving required to operate the replicator soothed Jin, and reminded her of the times that her father, Galen, had taught her to recite multiplication tables in her head when she couldn't sleep. Saw cared very much for Jin. He, perhaps rather presumptuously, quickly saw himself in the role of father and referred to her as his daughter for the years they spent together. He asked the help of a partisan woman, Idrissa Barrick, to procure clothes and advice about personal hygiene to Jin. Idrissa is one of the reasons why there's a canon Wikipedia page for periods, which, let's be clear, is something Legends never got. If someone wants to have an argument over which one is better, Legends or canon, which I don't think is a useful discussion, but if someone wants to talk about that...
Canon has periods in it.
Canon has women in it. Canon has a lot of stories written by women about women, and God does it matter. No shit on Legends. I like a lot of Legends stuff, and I would like to read more of Legends. Legends, you should have had more women.
Men.
It's a lot of stories by dudes for dudes, or stories by women for dudes. Partisans would come and go from the little base on Rhea. To quote the book Rebel Rising, sometimes Saw left on missions, sometimes people came to Saw. Handfuls of men and women at a time, occasionally organized groups, more often a hodgepodge of discontented people who were looking for a fight. Like Idrissa, a probably Andoranian human named Reese, a Twi'lek named Zosad that had frequented the bar Wanton Wellspring, and another human, a blue-haired ballistics expert named Staven, to name a few.
So they do have blue hair and pronouns.
Of course there are yes, they do have blue hair, yes. Anyway, Staven's family was saved when Saw got a supply ship past an Imperial blockade. A main focus of Saw's work after taking in Jin was to track down her father, and to find out what the Empire wanted him for. The Partisans had intel that said that the Empire had conducted large-scale mining operations on Christophsis and Ilum, and Gerrera had the sense that they were working on something big. When Saw's spies did track down Galen, they found him back on Coruscant, seemingly willingly working with Krennic. This revelation broke Jin's heart. She felt abandoned by her father after her mother had been killed on Lamu. Saw seemingly gave up his interest in Galen Erso after that, though the Partisans didn't stop their efforts to find the truth between the Empire's secret project.
I mean, he didn't try and kill him, which is something.
Galen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I bet he would have if he could have. Saw seems to semi-often target scientists in a really funny way. It was also around this time that Saw developed a working relationship with revolutionary Luthen Rael, leader of a rebel spy network from his headquarters on Coruscant, funneling supplies, munitions, and funds to various cells within his purview. Additionally, we know that Saw did the occasional deal with Enfys Nest and her Cloud Riders, as in 9BBY, they gift Saw with a shipment of refined hyperfuel for use in the cause.
So the hyperfuel from Solo was going to Saw Gerrera.
Yes, that is the implication from the Solo
I
A
like
Star
that
Wars Story
I
novelization.
like that a lot.
The denouement chapter in the Solo A Star Wars Story novelization is.
That is really cool. That is a great tie-in.
I didn't want to have to mention that, but good connection.
I did not know that,
setting.
so I'm very pleased with this.
Okay, as Jyn got older and more capable of defending herself, Saw would include her more and more in mission planning, and eventually she was always at his side when visitors came to the outpost, evaluating mission briefs and acting as planning counsel to Saw. Jyn also steadily improved at forging Imperial codes and documents, even learning how to digitally alter the appearance of holograms. She learns Photoshop.
Star Wars Photoshop.
Pretty much. When Jyn was 14...
Continue.
When Jyn was 14, the partisans received more intel that the Empire was particularly interested in kyber crystals. Remember them? And that a small planet in the Sunshi system where the Empire had found kyber was hollowed out by mining operations. Around this time, Jyn joined in her first field mission, an assassination on a small Imperial vessel containing scientists previously assigned to the sack of Ilum. Yeah, Saw really likes killing scientists.
He's a Luddite. That's what's going on.
He just doesn't hate, these fancy scientists and their newfangled ideas. Saw's team docked their ship against the Empires while they entered and hit their targets, and Jyn defended the transport tube between vessels. She didn't have to kill anyone. She almost did, and then she chickened out. Someone did it for her. We also know that by now, Saw's tune has largely changed. From someone who, at the beginning of his fight against the Empire, was focused on harboring civilians and refugees, gaining followers via his heroism and his dogged pursuit of the enemy, to a man hell-bent on making the Empire hurt at any cost. In a conversation with Idrissa, she mentions rumors about Saw's tactics getting more and more violent. Saw replies, "I do what needs to be done," to which Idrissa asks, "Are you saying that we should actually become a terrorist organization? That we should slaughter anyone between us and the Empire?" To which Saw says, "Why not? That's how they'll spin it anyway." Idrissa says, "That doesn't mean we should attack civilians to inconvenience the Empire. I don't care what they say, I care what we do, and we do not kill innocent civilians just to disrupt the Empire shipping lanes." Saw says, "It's a price of war. War is war, and it never ends." Remember that?
He coming back to this one, doesn't he?
He'll do it again.
He kills civilians for funsies.
I'm pretty sure we do not kill innocent civilians just to disrupt the Empire shipping lanes is a Saw killed innocent civilians to disrupt the Empire shipping lanes, but I have no evidence of that.
This is like a motherly chastisement of like a toddler. Like, we do not kill innocent civilians to disrupt the Empire's shipping lanes.
Bad boy.
Child. Yeah, bad boy.
Bad Saw. Hitting him on the nose with a newspaper. Yeah. It's also in this conversation that we have two very clear statements from Saw that show us how he thinks about armed resistance. First, he scoffs at Idrissa for being too idealistic and claims that bureaucracy kills freedom, which I see as the most extreme expression of his anti-governmental impulses yet.
Oh, the bureaucracy, that's what's stealing our freedom. Dad, did you know that the COVID vaccine is full of magnets from Bill Gates?
Secondly, Saw says that fear controls the masses. The Empire controls fear. If we tapped into that and brought about the same kind of fear, we'd control the people and give them the peace that you are so anxious to have. Do you remember the Empire's rule by fear approach as outlined by Tarkin? You know, the dumbass shit? It's the same thing.
I was about to say this. This is also like the opposite of what seems to be like the kind of prevailing narrative of the Rebel Alliance in general, right? Is like, you hear it from Princess Leia, like, the more you tighten your grip, the more worlds will slip through your fingers. So he's kind of counterculture. He's kind of punk.
Libertarians are the real punks.
Libertarians are the real counterculture in America. Liberals.
Saw as a libertarian is not correct, but it is funny. We'll talk more about Saw and ideology in a bit. It seems that to some degree, Saw settled down while Jyn was young, still going on missions, but taking fewer risks in order to prioritize raising her in his own way. Jyn knew how to disable the time detonator, and she came to be known to the partisans as Jyn Gerrera. But soon their dynamic changed. Saw refocused on the war effort, some partisans headquartered more and more at the hideaway on Rhea, and Saw got more distant, particularly when recovering from injuries. When Jin was 15, she was given her first solo mission, to target a Kyber researcher on the planet Horux and to kill him.
It's really just the scientist. What is his deal, man?
She waited in position with her blaster for hours before finally seeing her mark. Though she was just there as insurance, a planted partisan bomb detonated, killing the scientist instead. But the deed was done. Jin was a full-time member of Gerrera's cadre at that point. Some days she'd train, others she'd be out on missions. They largely attacked Imperial activity along Outer Rim trade routes, with Saw confident that the Empire was scaling up weapons development. However, at one point, Saw took a less than standard mission, a hired job in the Mid-Rim, on the planet Inusagi. Two partisans, Saw and a woman named Maya, were to join several other hired rebels, and Jin was tasked to come along in order to forge clearance codes for partisan ships, and to create Imagecaster invitations to gain the partisans' entrance to a royal party hosted by Inusagi's ruling chiefess. The party was set during the planet's annual Blossom Festival, a big tourist event to dedicate the new Imperial Sector Governor, given power after the Empire used its military might to force Inusagi's chiefess into signing a treaty to give up its previous neutrality. At the festival, Jin overhears a bunch of hushed conversations about the illegitimacy of the new imperial rule on Inusagi, that the people want to live under the chiefess and their previous democracy. Inusagi was invaded, after all. Jin does her job and she gets the 10 hired guns into the party, but disobeying Saw's wishes to sate her curiosity, she sneaks into the ceremony herself. The ceremony goes as you might expect. The chiefess welcomes the guests, an imperial officer introduces the new sector governor, Kor Tefeferin, a personal friend of the emperor. When the governor steps forward, so does the insurgents. Quoting Rebel Rising again, 10 people moved forward silently. Among them were Maya and Saw. Each held a dual canister FC-1 flechette launcher. Each flechette launcher would hold 6 anti-personnel canisters. Each canister held hundreds of tiny, razor-sharp flechettes made of durasteel that, when fired, would slice through the crowd, penetrating up to 10 centimeters, regardless of whether they hit a stormtrooper's armor or a soft Inusagian gown. Flechettes were deck sweepers, capable of decimating a crowd in minutes. Jin almost didn't hear the first launcher fire. The flechettes were silver, cutting through golden petals. People dropped, soaked in blood, before anyone thought to scream. The new governor's body fell off the stage. The chiefess crumpled, her silvery white gown stained red. In mere minutes, the floor was covered in blood and bodies.
So that's terrorism. That is not, that's just terrorism. Like, they couldn't have just brought a blaster and just shot the guy?
The point was the spectacle. It's terrorism, Sophie!
This whole scene, though, reminds me of this movie that I had to watch in this class this semester called The East, where, you know how the environment's being destroyed by, first of all of us, and second of all, corporations?
First of all, corporations, second of all of us.
Incorrect. Anyway, the point being, the environment is being destroyed by humanity, right? And so in the movie, there's this collective of anarchists who go around doing, like, corporate terrorism.
Anarchists actual or anarchists pop culture?
Anarchists pop culture.
Okay.
Like, free love, they live in the woods and eat dirt.
Okay, that's anarchists real.
But no, they go into this party of this corporation that has this drug that has a very rare side effect, killing people, basically. But this one's bad, and so they go in there and they put the drug in everyone's cups of champagne, because, you know, they're all going to toast to the drug or whatever. I don't know, that just reminds me of this. It's a good movie, you should watch it. I think it's an interesting exploration of kind of the politics of terrorism in general. Anyway. Yeah, they do that, and the corporation's CEO ends up being allergic to the drug and dying, eventually.
Rip Bozo.
I mean, they did take the drug off the market.
The hired rebels slew Imperials and civilians alike on a world dominated by unwanted Imperial rule. We're forced to ask how many people died at that ceremony that actively hated the Empire, that could have even funded the Alliance later on. Saw got away, but his partner Maya didn't. When Jin confronts Saw about the attack, he explains that Inusagi's proximity to Naboo, Palpatine's homeworld, would send a message to the Emperor that he is vulnerable.
Yeah, you see, if there's a politician, right, here's what I do when I want to make a statement, is I blow up the house 2 houses down from his to show him that he is vulnerable.
You're not going to be able to blow up Palpatine's house, you know?
I don't know, you could do the thing that the one lady did in The Last Jedi where she rams a spaceship into it at light speed. Like, I feel like the Empire would not be able to stop that.
Okay.
Just, like, point, like, a Mon Calamari cruiser at the Imperial Palace on Coruscant.
It's not.
And just, like, put a brick on the accelerator.
I'm sorry, you're advocating running the fucking Radis into the Imperial Palace. Do you understand how heavily populous Coruscant is?
Collateral damage.
That is the worst collateral damage of all collateral damages.
Blowing up a planet? Yeah, I'd say so. I don't know if it would blow up
It
a
wouldn't.
planet.
It wouldn't. But it'd be
Probably
bad.
like a bad asteroid strike. Yeah.
Actually,
Like,
it's kinetic orbital bombardment. That's a thing. But it's like that, but hyperspace, so it'd be worse. Okay.
anyway.
Jin calls what Saw and friends did a massacre, and Saw replies, "What do you think war is?"
God damn it, Saw. I want to like you, sir, but you just keep saying, like,
Just want to take him
bad
by the
things.
shoulders and shake him. After Inusagi, Saw didn't take Jin on missions for a long while.
Oh, no child soldiering for Jin Urso. Well, you're grounded from being a child soldier.
For bad reasons. Soon after, Saw grew more and more paranoid about Jin's vulnerability in his group of partisans, that someone could discover her parentage and realize how valuable she might be as a hostage to influence the Empire or Galen Urso himself. Saw claimed that there was a leak in their unit, and framed a freedom fighter, a Togruta named Jari, who had somehow learned of Jin's secret. Saw shot him, and while Jari pleaded that he was innocent, that he wouldn't betray the partisans, left him to die. Saw also seems to have tortured and threatened some of his own people, convinced that someone else knew.
I don't like him.
To protect Jin.
I don't like him.
In 5 BBY, the partisans receive intel about increased ore processing of the metals dunium and dolomite, Star Wars names, largely used for Imperial capital ships, but there's no word of increased Star Destroyer production, so the partisans trace these resources to where they're largely being shipped. Factory facilities on the planet Tamis Prime.
So is Tamis Prime where they built the Death Star?
It seems like different components were built in different places.
So they just built it in the middle of deep space then?
It depends where. The skeleton is built on Geonosis. Certain bits are built in processing facilities like these ones that we're talking about now, or on Narkina 5, right?
Wow, so this is like more than a Manhattan Project worth of like effort.
Yes.
Basic,
Well, yeah, it's a tremendous amount of manpower.
When the Manhattan Project happened, right, since we're talking about super weapons, that was like 2% of the US's GDP, which is a lot. I'm just curious, like, how much of the galactic domestic production was like spent on building this thing? Because I don't know if it just seems like it's everywhere, man.
Well, it is the Empire, so maybe it is like 2% still. I wouldn't be surprised if they just copped it from the Manhattan Project.
How much is 2% of gross galactic production? What is like the GDP per capita of the galaxy?
It's obscene. It's obscene. Anyway, Jin, Saw, and a small group of partisans infiltrate one of these facilities on a fact-finding mission. But one of them, the man Reese, betrayed the others to the Empire, selling out Gerrera and Jin as an Urso. Saw and Jin managed to get free from Imperial captivity, though Saw was seriously wounded by shrapnel in an effort to protect Jin. Saw handed Jin a small blaster and a knife he had hidden on his person, and told her to hide in a safe bunker until daylight the next day. She thought he'd come back for her, but he didn't. They didn't see each other again until Jeddah. Saw loved Jin in his own way. I'm sure he did believe that by leaving her behind, she was safer than with his partisans, which maybe, but dude's obviously not the best father figure.
Just when you were talking about that, it did remind me of that time that the Norwegian resistance skied into a Nazi heavy water plant.
What?
Yeah, so the Nazis, when they were trying to build a nuke, they decided they were going to use heavy water, which as it turns out is the wrong way to do it. But they invested a lot of money into it, and the only place in the world at the time where you could get heavy water was in this one factory in Norway. And so the Norwegian resistance, in like cooperation with like MI6 and shit, skied into the facility, blew the shit up, and then skied away.
There is nothing as cool as that in this episode in Star Wars. Like, for once, yeah, damn.
And the British thought that the Nazis weren't going to get the bomb because they did that, but as it turned out, it's because heavy water is a terrible moderating agent.
By now, Saw's partisans have been recruiting for over a dozen years, and new faces come and go, including dudes like Colby Sperado, a gunslinger that Gerrera rescued on Ceralonis, the mercenary heavy gunner Moroff, a woman named Magva Yarrow who survived the Gorman massacre, and pilot Azudo Chanch. Saw has also recruited a pair of Tognath brothers, Benthic and Edrio, both nicknamed Two Tubes. Refugees from the Empire's early invasion of their homeworlds, both took to the stars. Edrio worked as a sharpshooter and big game hunter and killed an Imperial moth, bringing him to Saw's attention, largely serving as a pilot for the partisans.
So he killed an Imperial moth as a sniper, and then Saw's like, oh, you know what you should do? Fly the spaceship.
Okay.
We're definitely not going to have you use your exceptional sniping skills. What you need to do is fly the spaceship. You need to be the getaway driver.
One, Edrio absolutely does still use a blaster rifle. Plenty. 2, it is a little bit of a discrepancy. I think it's weird that they gave that backstory to Edrio and not to Benthic. 3, we don't know that he shot the Moff. We know that he made sure that the Moff didn't come back from a safari.
So he shot them off.
He shot them off. Anyway, Benthic joined Enfys Nest's Cloud Riders to fight against the Empire and the crime syndicates that took advantage of poor refugees, before he joined Edrio with the Partisans, where he fought as a marksman. One's largely a pilot, one is largely a marksman, but they both shoot really good. At some point, the Partisans launch a raid on the planet Frisia, violently breaking into an Incom Corporation warehouse from which they claimed 8 T-65 starfighters, the ship that would become the prototypical Rebel X-Wing fighter. Saw is credited as one of the first rebel leaders to see the potential of the X-Wing in the anti-imperial effort, which in turn would demonstrate what would become a key tenet of Republic military doctrine, the focus on hit-and-run starfighter missions over combat between capital ships, which cells like the Partisans never had.
Capital ships are expensive, right? Like Somalia, right? You have all these pirates who are able to basically hold up the entire country's GDP by occasionally taking an oil tanker hostage, but they have these like little fast boats that are a real good hit-and-run weapon where you can get in there real fast, and then when you release the ship you can get away before like the US Navy sends like the SS George Washington or whatever, which has enough firepower to level a small country, but you can just get away before that. And this is like the same sort of doctrine where you can send in like, 5 X-Wings, which can do a lot of damage, but then just go away. A TIE fighter can't chase it because it doesn't have hyperspace, and a Star Destroyer is like too big to chase it.
Joined by several U-Wing support fighters, the squadron formed by Gerrera was dubbed the Cavern Angels, a reference to the various galactic caves that became storage and bases of operations for the Partisans. Indeed, Saw set up shop in the caves of Segra Milo, a barren planet riddled with empty, abandoned mines. Luthen Rael, who we mentioned earlier, meets Saw at this base and proposes a deal. In return for stolen Imperial equipment, Saw and his partisans would meet fellow anti-Imperial insurgent Anto Krieger, who is planning a mission to destroy the Imperial power station at Spellhouse, and needed air support. Saw soured at this proposal, claiming that he's not for hire to preserve his dignity. We know Saw is absolutely for hire, at least when he doesn't have to really work with anyone else. I think Saw's justification for his refusal to meet with Krieger says a lot about how he views other anti-Imperial actors. Luthen argues, whatever our final version of success looks like, there's no chance any of us can make it real on our own. We need the Empire to help. We need them angry. We need them coming down hard. Oppression breeds rebellion. Think of it. Think of Spellhouse in flames. Neither of you could do it on your own, but together. To which Saw replies, Krieger's a separatist. Maya Pei's a neo-republican. The Gorman Front, the Partisan Alliance, sectorists, human cultists, galaxy partitionists, they are lost. All of them lost. I am the only one with clarity of purpose.
Oh, that's funny how the Spanish Civil War, right? On one side, you have massive evil fascists, largely of the Catholic variety, which is the most funny variety in my opinion, relatively united because fascism is always founded on the unifying theory of fuck that guy, versus the Republic, right, which is like basically the equivalent of modern day Democrats, like a Democratic Party of the US, like regular liberals, communists, anarchists, every variety of anything like slightly to the left of being a Nazi.
And they all have to work together.
And as it turns out, it doesn't work a lot of the time because it's hard, right? Which is why you get this whole thing where the anarchists end up establishing like their own little independent not state briefly and fighting the Republic at the same time as the Republic is fighting the fascists and they're fighting the fascists. But, my clarity of purpose is more important than the greater cause of destroying fascism.
Well, that's the thing. Saw is a man who listens to no one but himself. When he changes his mind a couple of weeks later and agrees to the Spellhouse job, he demands his Cavern Angels take tactical orders from no one. Look, I guess Saw's a bad person for war crimes or whatever, but more than anything, Saw's an asshole.
I get war crimes are bad or whatever, but
I can excuse war crimes, but I draw the line.
You've been doing a lot of this but thing today. You're like, war crimes, but Cloud Soldier, but
we already know he's a war criminal. It's not interesting to say Saw Gerrera is a war criminal. We know he's a war criminal. And he doesn't seem to have any wider ideology besides his opposition to the Empire. Anyone who has goals or governmental aims or ideas for how to organize the galaxy is lost. Indeed, Saw is highly skeptical of anyone who does have ideology, insisting that people follow people, not ideas. Bureaucracy kills freedom.
So his ideology is just like cult of personality without all the usual strings attached.
Yeah. What you need to understand about the partisans is that a lot of them are there for the myth of Saw Gerrera. Saw saves them or affects their lives in some ways, and so they join. That's not all of them. Some of them are just normal-ass rebels, but, like, that's a lot of them, is people who are like, I am fighting with Saw Gerrera.
The Rocky Anderson theory of politics. So, there was a mayoral race in Salt Lake City recently, and we had this old guy who was mayor like 16 years ago who was running for election again. And from what I understand of his previous terms as mayor, either he made the plan or it shouldn't exist.
Jesus.
I'm not even kidding. The previous mayor, who was Didi Corradini, she had all these plans for the city, right? This is around the same time when we're getting like tracks built and we're starting to stop becoming a post-industrialization white flight crap. This is like when we're starting to become a city again. And she comes up with all these plans, like, we're gonna have the Olympics, we're gonna build tracks, we're gonna do this, and this. And Rocky, when he becomes mayor, chucks them all in the trash bin because he didn't make them. I guess what I'm saying, Rocky Anderson is basically Saw Gerrera, except without the war crimes of child soldiers.
Yeah. Okay. At some point, a commercial trade post near Segramilo notifies the Empire of pirate activity in a sector nearby, and the increased Imperial patrols put the partisans' mind to relocation, which eventually they do. The desire to hit the Emperor where it hurt still endured after the massacre on Inusagi, and came to a head when the partisans went after Quarsh Panaka, a stalwart loyalist to Palpatine, and Moff of the sector containing Naboo. In 3BBY, Saw's partisans detonate a bomb inside Panaka's chalet on a Nubian moon, killing the Moff instantly.
Does it kill anyone else?
It almost kills Leia.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
How does it almost kill Leia?
A coincidence, essentially.
She was there.
And left right before it went off.
Damn, that would have been bad. Almost as though a bomb is not the ideal tool for assassination, but I don't know.
It's a spectacle.
I suppose.
Sending a
Terrorism,
message.
yeah.
In 2BBY, Saw had put aside some of his pride and formed something of a union with the nascent Rebel Alliance, as headed by Bail Organa. Technically, it wasn't the Alliance yet, but it's close enough that the distinction is not worth it.
So at this time, is like Saw Gerrera's partisans, are they about the same size as the Rebel Alliance?
I don't know. There is
Okay.
no sense of scale. It's really hard to say.
Because what I was going to say is kind of interesting is it's kind of an interesting like parallel to how groups that hated each other came together to try and throw off the Nazis, specifically in the Warsaw Uprising, which was kind of a last gasp of Nazi control in Poland if the Soviets had not been assholes about it. I was trying to draw a comparison here basically between the very small remainders of the Jewish partisans who were left at this point after kind of the failure of the 43 ghetto uprising that they had launched, and the Poles, who hated the Jews probably more than the Nazis, but hated the Nazis more than they hated the Jews. So basically what I'm saying is the Poles really hated everyone at that point, but they hated the Nazis more, and so like these tattered remnants of kind of the Jewish partisans and what was called the Polish Home Army, which was the Polish resistance, rise up, take over Warsaw. As the Soviets are advancing towards Warsaw, preparing to take it over, they're like, we're going to throw up the city with open arms to the Soviet Union. And then the Soviets stop. They stop advancing. And so these guys are like fighting for their lives in Warsaw, trying to throw off the Nazis. And the Nazis, since the Soviets have stopped advancing, are able to shift forces back to Warsaw, crush the rebellion, and then 4 or 5 days after the rebellion is crushed, the Soviets start moving forward again and take Warsaw.
What the hell?
This is a Stalin moment.
Dicks. Anyway, so the partisans have partially joined with this division as headed by Bail Organa. Bail is unhappy with the partisans' targeting of Moff Panaka. Yeah, his daughter. But also, Panaka was considered pretty far outside the typical corruption and cruelty exhibited by most Imperial officers. Yeah, by all accounts, he's a pretty normal guy. Like, he upholds the system, but like, in a kind of just legal way.
And he's, of course, replaced with a hardliner because this is how this always goes.
Probably. Regardless of that, the partisans are given a mission by Alliance High Command to send a team to investigate the disappearance of the Geonosian people from the galaxy.
I'm sorry, what? Did the Empire genocide the Geonosians?
We're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting there. When they get to Geonosis, Saw's team loses contact with Rebel Command, and they were attacked by remote-controlled battle droids. In the labyrinthine tunnels under the Geonosian surface, the partisan team was picked off one by one until only Saw remained to fight back. He stayed alive on Geonosis for potentially months on end, or even longer. It's kind of unclear. And during this time, was exposed to a poisonous insecticide once used by the Empire to kill the Geonosian people, which had adverse effects on his long-term respiratory health.
They used insecticide on the entire planet?
Empire moment.
My god. That's like worse than Alderaan, man.
It gets a little bit worse.
Oh, good.
After long-time comm silence, the Alliance sends a rebel crew, the Spectres, to recover the partisan team and any intelligence they get, right? When the Spectres found Saw, the two rebel elements worked together to discover the source of the battle droids that killed Gerrera's men, a single Geonosian, using battle droids and an active shield generator on the surface to defend himself. The Empire committed a genocide against the Geonosians to cover up a massive industrial project begun on the planet.
They genocided the entire planet.
As a cover-up. This guy...
excessive.
It's a little much. This guy's potentially the only survivor.
Of a planet.
Saw and the Spectres capture and disarm the Geonosian, who Gerrera immediately began to threaten with violence in an attempt to interrogate what the Geonosians built for the Empire. But due to the language barrier involved, they do not speak the same language. Neither party fully understood one another. Saw handcuffs the Geonosian, but the Spectres intervene to prevent Saw from hurting him any further. The Geonosian leads the rebels to his living space, which Gerrera begins to angrily ransack to the Geonosian's distress, as he shows the rebels what he's been defending all this time. A Geonosian queen egg, the only hope for the repopulation of his entire species and culture. It gets a little worse.
It gets worse than that?
Saw insists on taking the Geonosian in for interrogation. He says, war is lost, damn the egg, which the Spectres negotiate down into temporarily relocating the Geonosian and the egg to their alliance base with the promise of bringing him home afterwards. However, Saw tries to renege on this agreement by mutiny, using the electrified handcuffs to tase the Geonosian, threatening to shoot the Queen Egg, and demanding to take the Spectres' shuttle. When an Imperial light cruiser coincidentally attacks, the Spectres convince Saw to stand down and return the egg to the Geonosian, and even get the Geonosian back to the planet to be able to protect the future for his people. But still, Saw is hung up on the threat of the project the Empire killed the Geonosians just to conceal from the galaxy.
I mean, as he should be, but also...
Yeah...
That's so he almost committed genocide.
It kind of feels like the biggest reason he doesn't commit genocide in that episode is because it's a kid show and they had to wrap it up without genocide happening again.
Man, the Empire genocided a lot of people, didn't it?
Star Wars, baby! Anyway.
I love how the destruction of an entire planet and its culture is like...
pretty par for the course.
The inciting incident of a movie.
Okay. For understandable reasons, Saw gains a reputation, even among other rebels, of being extreme, violent, and of being so singularly devoted to harming the Empire that civilian collateral damage and inhumane interrogation techniques become the partisan bread and butter. At some point, Saw gained possession of a Marion called Boar Gullet, a huge fucking cephalopod that, when set upon a prisoner, compels them to tell the truth, while destroying their memories and their mind. Boar Gullet! We don't know when he got Boar Gullet, I just felt like that was a good Boar Gullet section. Certified Boar Gullet moment. What's more, we know that Saw is kind of shit at being a team player when he's not in charge. He insists that anyone else's techniques are insufficient or soft. He tried to mutiny against the Spectre crew, and he would harbor people that the Alliance had kicked out. Levin Tenza worked under the Alliance General Dodonna until he was to be court-martialed for disobeying orders and preemptively attacking the mission target. Tenza escaped rebel detention and joined Gerrera. It was under these circumstances that Saw Gerrera was censured by official decree of Alliance Chief of State Mon Mothma, which dissolved the union between the Alliance and the Partisans. The censure reads thusly: Resolution of censure condemning Saw Gerrera of the Partisans in his conduct as a resistance leader and a member of the Alliance to Restore the Republic. Saw Gerrera, in violation of his vows to honor the Alliance's standards governing humane behavior, including the traditions established under the Rusan Armistice, has acted in a fashion contrary to the laws of civilized behavior and engaged in acts of moral repugnance unjustified under a state of war. Saw Gerrera's partisans, under Gerrera's sole leadership and direction, have targeted civilians and innocents, have employed cruel methods of interrogation, and have refused to respond to repeated concerns raised by Alliance representatives. It is concluded that Saw Gerrera has not acted in a fashion worthy of the Alliance's respect and trust. It is hereby resolved by the Chief of State of the Alliance to Restore the Republic and the members of the Alliance Council that Saw Gerrera be condemned for acting in a manner incompatible with the laws and ideals of this body. Which is, self-explanatory.
Go off, Mon.
Yeah, I know. Makes sense. Interesting that he took some vows somewhere in there. I don't know what that's about.
I assume that, when you join the Alliance, they're like...
Certainly as a leader.
Hey, here's our Scouts code. I promise to do my duty to the Rebel Alliance in my country, to obey the Scout law.
I promise not to kill civilians, to disrupt Imperial shipping lines.
To murder an entire species by killing the Geonosian egg.
Technically, he didn't do that.
But he wanted to.
He did kind of want to. With the last surviving member of the species right fucking there, yeah. Horrible man. In 1 BBY, Saw gains some intelligence that there's an outpost on the planet Jalindi with a massive Imperial communications relay, allowing for wide information dissemination, transmissions monitoring, and fleet organization. Saw passes the intel along to the Alliance, which they ignore. But after an Alliance mission goes sideways because of the Imperial communications, enabled by the relay, Saw plants a holoprojector on an astromech at the Rebel base on Yavin 4. The hologram is triggered, projecting Saw's face larger than life for all of the Alliance to see. Gerrera taunts the Alliance and Mon Mothma directly, saying, "You ignored my warning about the Jalindi relay and paid the price. Now you have confirmation, yet you refuse to destroy it. If you continue to allow this war to be fought on the Empire's terms, not yours, you are going to lose." Mon Mothma replies, "I will not be lectured on military strategy by a man who has proven himself a criminal. You target civilians, kill those who surrender, break every rule of engagement." To which Saw says, "I hope, Senator, after you've lost and the Empire reigns over the galaxy unopposed, you will find some comfort in the knowledge that you fought according to the rules." Now, okay, we know Saw. I think it's safe to say that Mon is obviously correct here. We don't see Saw's war crimes in detail all the time because Star Wars is a kid's series, but we know his reputation. We know how he operates. But additionally, before the Battle of Yavin and all that, the Alliance is at least officially devoted to a bureaucratic solution through the use of the Senate to, defang the Empire. Saw considers himself at war, but the Alliance doesn't at this point. This predates the formal declaration of rebellion by about a year, which we've talked about as the official moment that the Alliance properly avows itself to full-scale warfare. So Saw's own disdain for the Alliance's stance does make a degree of sense. The Alliance avails itself to full anti-fascist action when the Galactic Civil War begins, but I would agree that it mightn't have hurt to start a little bit sooner. Saw often acts in the morality tale of Star Wars as an embodiment of the maxim, the ends don't justify the means, doing overly violent bullshit with the noble goal of sticking it to the Galactic Empire. But of course, what we could say in response to that is that the means don't justify the ends. If all you care about is process and a willingness to compromise, prioritizing how you go about things at the sheer expense of what things you're going to, the people who are building fascism that obviously don't care about the means will exploit that bureaucratic goodwill. This is a lesson that the Alliance is forced to fully learn by the actions of Rogue One and the subsequent destruction of Alderaan. Still, Saw is Saw. I think it can be easy to say that the rebels are being too soft on the Empire, so the partisans were right all along, and Saw's actually based in normal. But that's obviously untrue. Saw's a bastard. He's correct in opposing the Empire, and he can be insightful at times, but he's clearly pretty cool with torture and targeted civilian attacks. We get it.
Smorcher. I personally am in favor of enhanced interrogation, as it regards to the Imperial menace.
Anyway, the Alliance decides to send a ship of rebels to spike the comm relay station so the rebellion can listen to the Imperial network themselves and spy on fleet movements. But as Saw mentioned earlier, the partisans have different priorities. Saw and Edrio Two Tubes take a Cavern Angels U-Wing to bomb the Jalindi station relay. But when they arrive, 3 rebels from the Spectres were already undertaking the mission for the Alliance. So, having been found out by the Empire and fucked up their mission, the Spectres accept Saw's offer for a safe extraction before the partisans' detonators explode, and Gerrera is forced to jump out of the system when a Star Destroyer arrives. Saw requisitions the 3 Spectre rebels to join him on a mission to Feos Station, where he's heard about a civilian freighter being loaded with a top-secret Imperial cargo, a cargo that Saw is convinced will lead him to the truth behind the construction projects on Geonosis and Tammy's Prime. Gerrera and the Spectres infiltrate a shipping container on the freighter as it leaves for its destination, and discover 8 prisoners being shipped to a covert location, all varying types of reactor or power technicians, taken by the Empire after refusing an offer to work on a secret project. One of the texts mentions that whatever special cargo is aboard came from the Jeddah system, which sets Saw back on track to locate his prize. Gerrera's disdain for the prisoners is clear, caring only for the answers to his questions and not at all for their safety, giving the excuse that the Empire has prisoners all over the galaxy.
He really just hates scientists is what's going on.
He doesn't like
here.
scientists, he doesn't like prisoners. Saw is racist against scientists and prisoners.
You know, if he was in charge of a state, it would be like Cambodia. Pol Pot, Saw just like shooting people because they're scientists. Like, I am Saw Gerrera, you have glasses, therefore are a scientist and will be shot.
The Spectres and Saw find another heavily guarded hold on the freighter, and when it's clear, they discover what Saw had been searching for across years without knowing it. A massive Kyber crystal, remember them? The length of 3 full-grown adults end to end, to be weaponized for the Imperial cause. Saw wants to wait for the ship to reach its destination, incensed by the prospect of unraveling this greater mystery, but the Spectres want to save the prisoners and leave. So Saw
was right on this one. They should have stuck around for that.
Probably. But Saw stuns the rebels and waits for the freighter to exit hyperspace. When it does, it drops into empty space, no planet or other operation present, besides an Imperial Star Destroyer, which it's a handoff. They're handing it off to the Star Destroyer. Anyway, Saw cuts his losses, attacks the massive Kyber crystal to further destabilize it, and abandons the imprisoned technicians to meet his partisan ship come for pickup. The Spectres escape with the prisoners, but only just. The unstable crystal detonates, which destroys the freighter and the Star Destroyer. For what it's worth, the techs that escape Imperial captivity decide themselves to enlist in the Alliance. But, all that aside, for the partisans, there is still one remaining lead. The origin of the freighter's cargo. And so, after almost 2 decades of operation, Saw moves his insurgency to Jeddah.
This, as it turns out, was a bad idea.
Generally frowned on by most.
Most people who want to stay alive recommend not moving your insurgency to Jeddah.
Most people on Jeddah recommend not moving your insurgency to Jeddah.
Most people on Jeddah recommend not living on Jeddah.
Jeddah was a cold moon in the mid-rim, orbiting the ocean planet Na-Jeddah. Jeddah is notable for its religious and spiritual significance, and gained the nickname the Pilgrim Moon, for the beings across the galaxy that would make pilgrimage to Jeddah to seek guidance in the Force at holy sites like the Dome of Deliverance or the Temple of the Kyber. Jeddah was an early origin site for the Jedi Order, but was holy to all manner of Force believers, such as the Church of the Force, the Sorcerers of Tund, the Central Isopter, and others. The vast majority of Jeddah's population resided in the Holy City.
This is extremely derivative, and I am disappointed by how derivative this is. Get it? It's Jerusalem, guys. It's Jerusalem. It's Jerusalem, but space.
I didn't want to do the Jeddah stuff is problematic episode, but the Jeddah stuff is problematic.
It's very problematic.
We'll talk about it eventually. Rogue One has its issues.
I also like that the Empire does, like, kill all religions.
They take that big gun and
Like,
just shoot religion.
They're like...
Based atheist moment.
They're like the internet atheists from the early 2000s. Like,
They're fucking Thunderfoot. You know, true, in that they're also fascists. Okay.
Don't read any more into this.
Anyway, yeah, Holy City, walled settlement, mesa, in the middle of the desert. It's filled with holy sites, markets, all manner of structures, with the Temple of the Kyber rising far above the wall's height, watched over by an order of monks known as the Guardians of the Wills. So you can imagine how bad things got when the Empire came to power. Imperial forces occupied the moon in order to mine its dense reserves of Kyber, and people on Jeddah did not like that. The Temple of Kyber is closed, and the Guardians of Wills are rebranded as a terrorist organization by the Empire. So, when the partisans arrive, Jeddah is already a war zone. Saw's people settle in the catacombs of Kadera, an ancient abandoned monastery a half-day's walk from the Holy City, said to be haunted by a long-forgotten people. Instead, it's haunted by the partisans as they join the Jeddah insurgency, which, unsurprisingly, is escalated further by Saw. The insurgency targets Imperial forces when mining or transporting Kyber. The partisans' hit-and-run tactics come back here in full force. When the Empire moves crystals on the ground via convoy, Saw's forces capture the Kyber with explosives and blaster rifles. The Empire establishes checkpoints and hidden outposts on the city streets to monitor and interrogate those they deem suspicious. The partisans themselves gain the attention of local extremists who join their ranks, and Saw sets up a local base under the Dome of the Anointed.
The tunnels.
The Imperials...
The Empire be like, the partisans are building massive tunnel complexes under Jeddah.
You're not gonna like this next one.
Oh no.
The Imperials use AT-STs and TX-225A occupier tanks to transport the Kyber, and the partisans tunnel underneath the Varnos Square vehicle base and set off an explosive device.
I love that for them.
Oh, man. When Kyber's moved by shuttle, the 6 remaining Cavern Angels X-Wings conduct air raids. The Empire brings in an Imperial-class Star Destroyer, the Dauntless, to hover above the Holy City as a threat to the insurgency, and to dispense flights of TIE fighters to perform regular patrols. Empire shit. Saw's forces consider the close quarters of the Holy City as a major tactical benefit to close quarters combat, particularly against armored Imperial vehicles. But when you're detonating explosives in a city square, you're implicitly accepting the cost. The partisans reportedly wound civilians as much as Imperials. The Holy City is incredibly dangerous for the people trying to live there, including families and children. Former Guardians of the Wills work to protect the civilians, informing them about trooper or militia strikes, harboring orphans in safe houses, and moving resources where they can. But the collateral damage in the Holy City is constant, and feelings about the conflict can't exactly be called warm. Saw, in his way, saw this as an asset, that the Empire will take more freedom and punish more people. The result is the same. More and more people will rise to fight alongside us. We can see here that Saw's bought into Luthen's ideological bent, that oppression breeds rebellion, and the more and more they can goad the Empire into cracking down, damn the consequences, the more ordinary citizens will fight back. And some do, but many just want to not die. Saw holds open disdain for what the Guardians of the Wills are doing when they're doing mutual aid shit. Adding to the cost of insurgency, Saw himself sees a tremendous decline in his own health during the Jedha campaign. In his own words, "The Empire has hounded me across the galaxy, planted spies within my cadre. They tried to assassinate me on Aramin, poisoned me with Tekatin. I was sick for months. On Gita there was a sniper who missed by centimeters. They sent an astromech laced with nano-explosives, and it went off and killed 4 of my best people. And again I was wounded, but I survived." I have no idea when this stuff happens, but by now the insecticide has gotten to his lungs, for which he requires a respirator and wears a pressure suit at all times. He's lost a leg and potentially an arm, I can't tell, which have been replaced with cybernetics.
I think it's kind of funny that he has to, and then just talks out until he's out of breath and, brings the thing back.
It's probably like an inhaler where he can breathe sometimes, but, better with the mask. Saw modifies a personal medical droid to bypass conventional protocols, allowing Saw access to painkiller drugs at dangerous levels. When the droid tries to argue for discontinuing treatment, Saw will deactivate it.
So it's like, "Sir, Mr. Gerrera, you should sure stop popping 42 Vicodins a day."
And then he flips the switch.
Turn that shit off and back on.
Turns it back on tomorrow. Saw's mind is also clearly not what it was, but I don't really know how to quantify that, so...
he's taking too many drugs.
Maybe because he's dying of poison.
Maybe Kyber crystals are meth after all, and he's just been
they're finally collecting the crystals at Jedha, and so, yeah. Okay.
A bump of Kyber.
A bump of Kyber. That's such a good episode name. Damn.
You're welcome.
That's killer. We know how the rest of this goes. In the year 0 BBY, an Imperial pilot defects and is sent to Saw Gerrera with a message by Galen Erso.
He proceeds to put it into the giant squid.
The pilot gets Borgulleted. Yeah. Jin and a rebel spy go to Gerrera to get whatever information he's gathered. When Saw and Jin reunite in the partisan base on Jedha, Saw gives her the message from her father. And shortly thereafter, the holy city of Jedha is destroyed by an Imperial orbital bombardment. A charged laser from the Death Star.
Half charge.
A laser from the Death Star. The Empire's superweapon that Saw has been following traces of for the past 13 years. Rip Bozo.
I would simply have been smarter.
I would simply have not blown up the Star Destroyer and gotten taken by the, I don't know.
Oh man, swallow a tracker pill, man. It's not that
But they're not going to take him to the thing. If they know he's there, they know that Star Destroyer is made. So that's never going to go to the place. It makes sense to blow it up, but come on, man. Jin escapes along with the rebel spy, as do some partisans. But Saw Gerrera finally is killed. Hooray!
Red Bozo.
And the crowd goes wild. Yeah. Saw's legacy is mixed. A lot of partisans die along with him on Jedha, like Edrio 2 Tubes. But yeah, others make it out. Benthic and some Jedha survivors stay on the hollowed out shell of the moon among magma seas and poisonous skies, where they fight against what remains of the Imperial mining occupation, and are occasionally supplied by the Alliance. Staven, from Saw's cadre on Rhea, remember the blue hair one, and Lux Bonteri from Onderon, the senator, formed the Dreamers, partisans stationed off-world when Jedha was destroyed, an insurgent cell meant to live up to Saw's dream of a liberated galaxy. They fought in the Gerrera way, and did all manner of war crimes, but after the Battle of Yavin, the Imperial Spec Ops team, Inferno Squad, infiltrates the Dreamers and eliminates most of its members. The Rebel Alliance does break out into an all-out war with the Empire, and after 5 years they win. The Alliance forms a government in the Republic's image, which I'm sure Saw would have absolutely
hated.
Yeah, he would have fucking hated it.
If I'm gonna pass sentence on him, 30 to life.
He's dead,
I don't
so
believe
whatever.
in the death penalty, but 30 to life.
I don't believe in the death penalty, but fuck that guy. Yeah, any other closing thoughts on Saw, that bastard Gerrera?
I think it's interesting how they tried to name him after Che Guevara, who was, by all accounts, not that much of an asshole.
Well, remember that Saw originates in the Clone Wars as just a guy who's doing insurgency.
Right, and so they're just like,
yeah, they're
you are
like,
famous insurgents.
Yeah, we need to make a name, Saw Gerrera. And then Rogue One is like, we need a guy, Saw Gerrera.
Like, don't get me wrong, Che Guevara, he killed civilians, but not like that.
But he wasn't a dick.
He wasn't a dick, and it normally, I don't think, was, like, on purpose.
Right. It was kind of Saw's M.O. to kill civilians.
So, you can wear your Che Guevara t-shirt without worrying about him being like Saw Gerrera. Or maybe don't, because that's cringe.
I want the cringe Che Guevara shirt, but with Saw Gerrera. I like how I opened this episode going, I'm not really looking to condemn Saw Gerrera, but
and then we just condemn
it
Saw
just
Gerrera.
happens, okay? I didn't set out to do that in this episode. Saw Gerrera does some bullshit.
He's ultimately ineffective.
Kills a bunch of people. Probably isn't awesome for recruitment long term.
Yeah, in the rebellion, there is a certain extent to which, if you are an anti-government group, you are going to get called terrorists. Period. What doesn't help is when you actually do it.
Right. People are like, Saw, you're doing terrorism. And he's like, well, the Empire's gonna say I'm doing terrorism anyway. And it's like, that's not the point.
The point is, propaganda is more effective when it's true. If you're actually doing terrorism when the guy you're fighting against says you're doing terrorism, do not do terrorism.
Have an eye towards PR. Steela cared about PR, and Saw didn't.
And she died.
And so he was a loser.
Correct.
Okay. We are behind as shit on emails, so we're gonna do some short ones. Johnny S. says, hi, Eleanor, and probably Sophie, too. Yeah, that is who reads these emails.
Probably Sophie.
That is who reads these emails. Stumbled on the pod a couple weeks ago, right around the time my non-binary daughter found her way to the Dr. Aphra comics. That's really sweet. Dr. Aphra is good for little queer kids. I mean, of a certain age. But yeah, I'm glad that your daughter has that in their life. Absolutely love your work. I still have a couple episodes to catch up on before I feel like I have any good questions or requests. Until then, I wanted to make sure the inbox wasn't completely empty between now and then. Thank you, Johnny. Thanks, Johnny. Yeah, just let us know.
That was like a twins moment there.
Yeah, it was. It was a little much. Yeah, let us know if you have anything to say. We would love to hear. Our next email is from Anonymous. They say, hi, y'all. I'm very curious about Padme Amidala's characterization, especially that as a political figure. I've watched all of the Clone Wars where that's touched on, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on her role as a somewhat rebellious member of the Galactic Senate and her politics as a whole, given your deeper knowledge of Star Wars lore. Loving the show, Anonymous. Yeah, our deep knowledge of Star Wars lore.
I would characterize her as, the squad of Star Wars, right?
Yeah,
we all know what that means, right?
She's a lib.
She is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was
Or
white and lived
yeah.
in space. And was also briefly the queen of a small country.
Yeah, I mean, hell, I probably could have a lot to say on Padme's portrayal as a politician, but I would have to go reread the Queen's Trilogy by E.K. Johnston. Maybe Padme is the next person we do an overly long biographic episode on, Saw. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, Padme's pretty middle of the road, but she is kind of radical in that she wants to not be doing the Clone War, which, I mean, when everyone's doing horrible warmongering, a person being normal and reasonable is going to seem pretty rebellious.
She's like that one Montana representative who voted against the U.S. entering into World War II. The only person who voted against the U.S. entering into World War II, by the way. I don't know. Take some courage to stand up to your convictions, even if your convictions are don't fight fascism.
Okay, but they probably shouldn't have been doing the Clone Wars. So
no, they should not.
That's not the same.
No, I was just drawing a relevant story because that's more than one person voted against the Iraq War.
Padme was not the only member of the opposition in the Senate.
Bail Organa.
Bail Organa, Rio Chuchi, Anaconda Farr, that one
Other
guy.
people.
Yeah, a bunch of guys. Maybe we'll talk about it sometime.
Maybe it is more like the Iraq War then. We probably shouldn't have been doing it, but not very many people voted against it because the Separatists had weapons of mass destruction.
Thank you very much for your question. It's a really good one, and I'm sorry we can't give it a better answer, but genuinely, I think we're going to talk about this at a later date. Yeah. Our next email is from Gwen Weisskopf. She says, "Hi, daughters."
First of all, I would like to say that all future podcast emails should use that as the subject line. I like that. Continue.
Hi, daughters. That's a really cunty, like, morning show name.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Gwen. I'm a 26-year-old trans woman from Philly. I'm a social worker and massive fan of Star Wars. Just listened to your entire podcast, and it's truly amazing. That's a lot of hours, Gwen. I know we're just starting, but Jesus. I hope you continue making the podcast and get to talk about some of my favorite topics in Star Wars. Your video on queer rep in Star Wars made me think of Sister, a trans clone trooper who appeared in the books Brotherhood and Queen's Hope. Not a major character by any stretch, but as a huge fan of the clones and a holdout for Omega being confirmed as trans, I had to share her. I will say, Gwen, I do believe I mentioned Sister, but I did fuck up in the script for that episode, and I did not include her in the timeline. I just kind of had to throw her in at the end. Sister was like one of the things I wanted most to talk about, and then I just completely forgot about her while writing, which was very embarrassing. But yeah, I'm a big Sister fan. She has only appeared incidentally, but she's essentially been given extreme plot armor by the people who created her because it sucks to kill your gay characters. So I think there's a really strong chance we're going to see her in a more prominent role in the future. I am also an Omega trans truther, but we gotta see how season 3 of The Bad Batch shakes out, because at this point it could be anything. I still have my personal pet theory, and maybe I'll talk about it someday, but because things ended so ambiguously in the last season, I don't want to get my hopes up too far, I guess. Also in the episode on droids, you totally left out the most based Star Wars droid ever, Mr. Bones. I do love Mr. Bones. I will say I don't have a lot to say.
What is Mr. Bones?
Mr. Bones is a modified B1 battle droid, painted red and black and strapped with like animal bones all over his body to make him scary because he's fucking terrifying. Mr. Bones was programmed by the, I think, 12-year-old Snap Wexley, who makes him this horrifying killing machine. He is very funny. He's very silly. He killed a lot of guys, and I like him a lot. I don't know if he has a lot of...
What kind of guys did he kill?
Stormtroopers.
Oh, okay.
Fascists.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah, people like Mr. Bones. It's possible he's killed people who aren't fascists, but
he's nice.
That's not important.
He's nice.
Mr. Bones is a friend. Anyway, yeah, Mr. Bones, love Mr. Bones. Gwen is extremely based. Much love to you and your loved ones. Free Palestine, long live the rebellion. Gwen.
Topic line, is Darth Maul a twink?
Oh yeah! The subject line for this email from Gwen is Darth Maul a twink? What do you think, Sophie?
Yes, no elaboration required.
Absolutely not. He's way too ripped.
Twinks can be ripped.
Twinks cannot be whipped.
Twinks can be ripped.
That's a twonk. That's a twonk. Darth Maul is a twonk.
Fair enough. Is Darth Maul a femboy?
No! Darth Maul is not femme. Darth Maul is not Twinkie. He's ripped and masked and swole as hell. He's
Ellie is horny for Darth Maul.
No, I'm not horny for Darth Maul. I'm horny for General Grievous. We've been over this, not on the podcast.
He has a lot of fingers.
That is the main focus of all of the Grievous smut I have ever read, is just his fingers. That's why I read Grievous smut, is because people never know what to do with him, besides the fingers. Like, sure, there are some other options, but they're all stupid. I love people attempting to write porn with General Grievous because they always fail. Okay, that's it for emails now. If we have not replied to your email, this episode is frighteningly long. I think this is going to be the longest episode. I know I thought that last week, but I was wrong. I think this week is going to be the longest episode. It's going to be real fun to edit. But we will get to it next time. If you want us to read your email on the show, or have any questions, suggestions, or corrections, you can send them to daughtersferrix@gmail.com. If you want to listen to new episodes as they release, you can find us on most places you can listen to podcasts. On our website, daughtersofferrix.com, or follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok @FerrixPod. FerrixPod. I've been Eleanor Mueller. You can find me at The Letter Bomber on most platforms. Sophie, where are you?
Twitter @SophiaandSLC, and also at @TheRedLine_pod, where I talk about trains mostly.
Our episodes are written and edited by me, Eleanor Mueller, and Sophia Dunstan. Our podcast art is by Jill Mueller. Our intro and outro music was arranged by me, with themes by Nicholas Bertel and John Williams. Thanks for listening.
Bye.